Welcome back to another session of discussing the PHP MyAdmin application and our use of it in this section of Web 250. What we're going to look at now is how to work through some of the basic commands that allow us to pull information from a database and create new database entities such as tables, and also how to update and insert data into our database. So let's start off by looking at some of the queries in the SQL tutorial that's on W3 Schools that you're supposed to have read through. What I suggest you do is have a window with the W3 Schools material open and have your connection to PHP MyAdmin going at the same time so that you can actually work through some of the queries that they have based on the tutorials on W3 Schools. So let's take a look at how we go about pulling information from our database, and we're going to look at the most basic of queries, the select query. Basically, this is saying select something from our database, in particular a table. So if we look at select star, and by the way, I'll have a comment about the star in a minute. And then let's select that from categories, since that's a fairly small table. And that's it. What this is saying is select everything, okay, from categories. And if I click on the Go button, I will get a result. And this shows all the different categories of our products in our Northwind database. If you followed the initial podcast, you should have already had this database into your system. So here's all of my categories with everything. Notice this is what's called by a lot of people that work with databases as a lazy query. You're doing a select star. You're saying, I'm not going to bother looking this up, seeing what I specifically need. So instead of doing this type of query, the more efficient way to do it is to select, say I just want to see the category ID and the category name. So now I've asked for two specific pieces of data rather than just saying, hey, give me everything regardless. So let me go ahead and click Go now. And it's much less data coming back, but it's the data, only the data that I needed. Now, that may not seem like much for a small table, but if I go back in and look at, say, the customers table, and I tell it select star from customers, okay, now I've got a lot more information that I'm bringing back. And I may not even use but a few pieces of this. So that's a very inefficient way to ask for data. But again, select is how we go about requesting information from our database. Now, let's look at our database again, and let's look at our employees. And if we look at some of this data that we're having, for instance, our cities that we're seeing in our list of employees is varied. So let's look at two different ways of querying that information. First, I'm going to do a select city from employees. If I click Go, notice that I'm getting all these duplicate cities, London, Seattle. What if I just wanted a list of the individual cities, but not duplicates? So I could sit here and go distinct cities from employees. And I click go. And this is just going to give me a list of the cities that are not repeated throughout my list of cities coming back. But let's take this one step further. Let's take this same query and let's add a qualifying phrase to it so that we can control the output. I'm going to add an order by city. Our output before was just coming back in any random order that's based on database entry. So when I click go on that, notice now that my cities are coming back in alphabetical order. There's a lot of reasons you'd want to do that, and I'll leave that for you to discover in your finding out what is going on with PHP and building an application. Let's look at creating a new data entry point. So we're going to look at creating a new category. Let's just create something that's not in here. Since this is pretty much all food items, let's add pet food. Okay, so we'll have a new category. So let's do this. We'll get rid of that. So we need to put the data or insert the data into the new table. So the way to do that is to insert into and then give it a table name. So in this case it'd be categories. And then we're going to give it values. And if we do it this way, we have to give it a value for every column in the table. So this is, we'll have to give it a category ID. As you remember, we were up to 8, so I'll give it 9, comma. Category name is pet food. Description, food for man's best friend. And picture, I'm just going to give it a dummy picture identifier. And away we go. Notice my result comes back, one row inserted. No errors. So if I go to categories now and look, there's my pet food. Now, the PHP MyAdmin gives you an easy way to get rid of items in our database. So I can just simply click on this X and it's going to delete this whole row of information. In this case, I'm going to tell it no because I want to actually go through this process and manually delete something. Because if I were working in a real database situation, working with a real web application, then I would need to do the delete, actually do the delete function. So let me go again, categories, SQL, and now I'm going to do a delete. From categories. Now you have to be very careful with the delete function because there's no undoing when especially when you're doing it programmatically. And then I have to give it a qualifier. If I hit go right now, I will delete everything in the categories table. So I'm going to do delete from categories, where category equals 9. And this is the one we just created. Notice how the PHPMyAdmin likes to try and protect you from yourself on these things. So this is just something that's there for your benefit, for your protection. Notice it did delete a row of data. So if I go back to categories, I can see that that is the case. Well, that's all for this podcast. Next time when we come back, we'll look at doing some more difficult functional activities with our database, such as joins and unions. Until then, this has been Mike Shore from the Web Technologies Department.